right, folks, welcome to another episode of the Core Link Solution, where we bring you awareness and actionable insights. And on this episode, I have with me Emeka Oguh, the CEO of PeopleJoy. Emeka, welcome to the Core Link Solution.
Thank you, James. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you can hold tight for a moment. I just want to give people a little glimpse of your background so they know who they're talking to today. Emeka Oguh brings over 13 years of experience in product management, entrepreneurship, and finance with a focus on financial technology. He is currently developing solutions to the student debt and savings crisis as founder and CEO of PeopleJoy. In addition to serving on the board of trustees for the Quantitative Alpha Architect EFT funds and a partner at Parameter Ventures. Again, Emeka, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here today.
Absolutely. So, it's interesting when you said student debt and savings crises in the first paragraph, man, of your bio. I mean, that just sings and rings gravity, man. When you have that as a part of your first piece of your bio, and then we're going to dive into that. But on a lighter note, let's start on a lighter note. One of the things I always love to do with guests to the program is really just introduce who they are. In terms of, if you thought about some people who think they know Emeka best, what's one thing that they don't know about you that you can share with the audience?
Oh, geez. I'm never good at these because it's one thing they don't know about me. I always think about my wife, who, we're celebrating our 8-year anniversary in April, and we've been together for 15 years, and she knows me best, and I feel like she knows me like an open book.
Sure.
I think maybe the folks that on the business side don't know that I have a very humorous side to me. I could be a bit of a jokester. People who know me well know that, but folks that, kind of business circles don't always get to see that side of me. So I guess the reverse of your question, most people who know me know exactly who I am, sometimes better than I know myself. And they'll be the ones who tell me, Emeka, this is how you respond in this situation. Just that's who you are. Don't go against the grain.
Gotcha.
And so I usually like those folks to anchor me, because sometimes, we get to points in our lives where we violate our core of who we are, and that ends up putting us in a lot of trouble. So I like the folks around me to keep me grounded. They always remind me of, you always have the, folks back home always, no matter how big you get, they always know how to.
They pull you right down.
Remind you who you are. Yeah. So those folks, they know me inside and out. They know the good, the bad, and the ugly. So.
Absolutely. That's good. That's good. So let me ask you this, man, because one of the things I didn't go through your full bio, man, but you are a Harvard grad. So your Rutgers undergrad, master MBA from Harvard Business School. You could have chose to do a number of different things. And like I was beginning to say, man, the first part of your bio jumps into this mega problem that you call the student debt and savings crises, right? What made you get into this line of work, man? What's your why behind this?
Yeah, so I've always been a saver and an investor since a very early age. So, my parents are both from Nigeria. They migrated here in the 70s, and I grew up in New Jersey. Was born and raised in New Jersey, and like most immigrant kids, you learn very early the difference between wants and needs. You see your parents working 16-hour days, just grinding away, and they'll give you what you need, but if you want something, you got to go out and get it yourself. You got to go figure it out. So I figured out pretty early that if I wanted the Jordans, the Sega Genesis games, and all that stuff, I had to get those myself. And so I got a job after 8th grade. I got a job working at an office, and I bought a savings bond with my first paycheck. And this is not what I wanted to do. Again, I wanted the Jordans and the games, but my mom's an accountant, and she, my first check, we opened up a savings account at a bank. It was Banco Popular, and we bought the savings bond. She explained to me Series E bonds, Series I bonds. These are government treasury bonds. I think at the time they were earning 5 or 6%, which was pretty high at the time, and it taught me the value of delaying gratification. And compounding interest and an amortization table. So all, financial terms that most 14-year-olds don't think about, but I experienced that early on. And that was really what drove me. Since then, really focusing on that. That's really what was my why behind always sort of being interested in financial services and delaying gratification. I ended up using those savings bonds to pay for my prom 4 years later to help pay for it. But it taught me, you put money away, invest it, and then you put $1 away today, in a few years, it may be $3, maybe $4. And
Right.
so I became a huge saver. And my first job out of school was at Merrill Lynch. And, I was in fund of funds due diligence in our investment management and guidance group, where we oversaw $315 billion of assets. And that's where I really built up my technical chops, got my Series 7, Series 65, all the licenses around it, really helping structuring different investment products for our clients. And as you mentioned, I went to Harvard Business School for my MBA, where alongside my wife's medical school debt, we accumulated $400,000 in student loans.
Mm.
And we dealt with the crisis of paying down student debt and saving,
Yes.
and the trade-off of doing both. And while we were successfully able to navigate it, it was not without a lot of mistakes along the way.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be this hard. It doesn't have to be this hard for the 40 million borrowers. You shouldn't have to have a Series 7 or Series 65 license to navigate student debt. And our company, PeopleJoy, is making it so it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack on what you said. So let me go back. Let me start on the lighter side. When you said Sega Genesis, I'm like, this man is speaking my childhood language. That's a whole nother episode. All right. So that's another episode we got to come back on. But there's another episode we need to come back on. When you said your first paycheck around the age of 14, you went and got a bond. I remember my first paycheck around age 14. I was trying to get my first set of turntables, right? Because I wanted to be a DJ, okay? And that back then, it was Technique turntables. Those turntables were $350 a piece.
Wow.
Okay? And that they didn't even come with the needle, okay? And you need two, okay? I was trying to work the whole summer to get them turntables. So, and then you said you used it 4 years later to go on the prom. So I know, one, there's a number of parents going to watch this podcast go, okay, how do I get my child into that? Okay. Now, kidding aside, what got you to think about things that way? Like, seriously, let's just take 3 minutes on that. What helped you understand the importance, the delayed gratification? Just like you said it, delayed gratification, right? The appreciation of that, and even that appreciation, interest, maybe rule of 72 in simple terms, right? What made you think about that?
Yeah, I got to give it to my parents. Just the work ethic they had, and always teaching us to. My mom again was an accountant, so she was very much the financial wizard of the family. In terms of making a dollar out of 15 cents. We grew up in very humble beginnings, but I never felt poor, right? And seeing my parents work hard, but also in some cases not seeing them invest and having to work hard because of that. There were certain things that I admired and I took from, and there were other things that I said, I don't want to have to deal with that. Right. And I've always sort of had this mindset that I wanted to build a life where I had passive income and I had income streams that could essentially cover my daily expenses, so that I wouldn't have to, so that I can see my family, that I can go on vacations with my family, and some of the things that we didn't get to do growing up when I was growing up.
Right.
And so those are the things that, I always had a chip on my shoulder, growing up. It was always something within me that I think drove me to want to, achieve those things. And when you're in a situation, an environment where you don't have those things, you either choose two different paths, right? You either just give up and say, I don't deserve these things, or you say, I'm going to do everything in my power to accomplish these things. So, for me, it was working on Wall Street, right? It was something that not a lot of people that, my skin color, whatever you call it, from where I live, did. And I wanted to do that. And so those are little things that I always just kind of did to drive myself. And you asked about the why. What was my why? And it's interesting because PeopleJoy is actually the third startup I've been involved with, the second of my own. And I told a company prior to starting PeopleJoy, and I knew that when I started PeopleJoy, I wanted to do something that I was super passionate about, and that I would stay the course with. Because as you know, being an entrepreneur, it's not glamorous, right? Despite what Hollywood tells you, And oftentimes there's just as many downs as ups. And if you're not passionate about what you do, you're going to burn out.
Yes,
right.
sir.
And I can, we can both talk about folks who just sort of chase something because it was the flavor of the month. It was the, the hot cryptocurrency. No, again, no knock to anybody who's doing a cryptocurrency startup, but I know a lot of folks who were really invested in those sorts of businesses and others who just thought it was a get rich quick scheme, and they flame out when the market drops. And so I ask people, what's the one thing that I'm good at? And I asked those close to me, what's the one thing that I'm good at? And everyone sort of said the same thing, like, you set a goal and you stick to it. And so I thought, okay, what are businesses you could build around goal setting that are scalable, and I'm passionate about? And obviously, I knew it had to be in financial services. And then the student debt piece is the thing that not only I experienced, but I know that 44 million people do.
Right.
I know that it mostly impacts women own 2/3 of the outstanding student debt. Minorities come out of school with more student debt than their white counterparts. And if you look at women and minorities, they're paid less on the dollar. So you're coming out with more debt, you're getting paid less. So it's taking you longer to pay off the debt, you're investing less. So I knew that this was a crisis that just the financial and savings crisis impacts on so many levels, not just Americans, but there's the racial wealth gap that it impacts. There's the gender wealth gap that it impacts. There's just so many things that when you really dive into this space, you realize like how big of a problem this is. And that I love solving big problems.
Right.
That's really the drive behind it. It's just that there's so many things that this impacts, and there's so many things that you'll be able to do when you're debt free and you're able to start investing.
Yeah, no, that's good, man. That's so good. I hope that's really helpful for a lot of our parents who are listening and thinking about how to help their children. And to that point, given what you do now, your Series 6 and everything that you do, if parents are saying, man, Emeka, what's one book you might recommend to my 13, 14-year-old if you had one? And if you want an answer later, that's cool as well.
No, I can answer it now. I mean, it's Rich Dad Poor Dad. I mean, Robert Kiyosaki.
I got it right over here somewhere. That's a common go back to book.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly. It's one of those, timeless books that no matter how old you are, no matter when you start reading it, it's a great book to read, to just start thinking of that mindset. And honestly, I didn't read. I read a lot when I was a kid. I read a ton, but I didn't read self-help books. I read a lot of science fiction. My head was, I thought I was going to be a writer.
Gotcha.
Coming into school, I used to write short stories, a lot of science fiction, and all my teachers were saying, Emeka, you were going to be a writer. Ended up being an electrical engineer. So long story, but it wasn't until I my 20s that I really started to read kind of personal development books. And sometimes I look back and say, man, if I had access to this book when I was 14, I'd be the next Mark Zuckerberg, right? I mean, we all tell ourselves those kind of stories, but I would say Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's just a great book. Yeah, powerful book.
So when you said again, student debt and savings crisis, I wanted to, I knew you would, but I definitely wanted to put some quantitative terms to that. So I was looking at the American Federation of Teachers website last night, and some of these numbers just really they're just, listen, let me read some of the numbers. And again, American Federation of Teachers website, more than 45 million student loan borrowers owe student debt, a result of decades of disinvestment in public higher education that has shifted costs on the students and their families while leaving colleges and universities underfunded. Collectively, student debt is over 1.5 trillion. And this debt surpasses all types of household debt other than mortgages. So all of the household debt is surpassed by student debt with the exception of mortgages. Unlike holders of other types of consumer debt who have experienced lower levels of delinquency and default since the Great Recession, student loan borrowers remain in distress. And I think you may have said this, Emeka, in your video. This grows at $226 per second.
$2,726
per second. So while we're talking, this is just racking up $226 per second. Nearly 1 in 4 federal borrowers are in debt, are in default or struggling to stay current on their loans. So 45 million people, there's 300 at last count, 330 million people in the US. So roughly was it 10, 20, 15% of the population.
Yeah, yeah. And when you look at just the working population, which is 160 million around
Right.
that phase, you're looking at 1 in 4, closer to 1 in 4 folks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So talk about, man, when you are trying to get your hands around it and PeopleJoy's mission, help put in the context what PeopleJoy brings to the table to try to help solve this mission.
Yes. So yeah, so when we first launched PeopleJoy, again, it was looking to provide solutions to help people reduce their debt burden so that they could, again, I guess to give full context, the goal of PeopleJoy is to help people pursue financial freedom. Even the name PeopleJoy, it's about the pursuit of happiness. When we came up with the name, if you look at the Declaration of Independence, it says that every person is entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Unfortunately, at that time, uh, you know, the British were locking us up in debtors' prisons for not paying our debt. Student debt is the 2021 debtors' prison for Americans today, and so we cannot pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness if we're shackled with debt, if we're constantly being tethered to it. And so we set out to help people pursue financial freedom by removing the roadblocks to saving and investing and putting money away for retirement, which all these things, student debt does all these things. Student debt impacts, I think, for the average student debt balance, I think of around $35,000 that folks are coming out of school with. It delays homeownership by a little over 7 years.
Wow.
70% of people who have student debt are either not maxing out their retirement, their 401ks or 403bs, or aren't investing for retirement altogether. They're waiting to address the student debt problem first. So when we looked at solving this, the first step was, how do we reach people through a channel that they understand and that they trust? And so we made a decision to work with employers, because if you think about it, the employer is the epicenter of most people's financial wellness. That's who manages your retirement through your 401k or 403b. That's who manages your healthcare insurance. That's who manages your life insurance. Really your employer is where you go to for all these things. And we partner with employers to offer a solution because they were also looking for tools that attract and retain talent. We know that 70% of people coming into the workforce out of undergrad have student debt. Not only that, we know that Gen X and baby boomers have the most student debt, right? They have even more student debt than, which is, most people don't know that. They assume that it's a Gen Z and a millennial problem. And so we knew that this is a problem that cuts across multiple generations. And if employers wanted to attract and retain talent, it would be in their best interest to offer solutions like this. So one of the first services we offer were solutions for employers to help attract and retain talent through incentives that they could contribute to the employee student loans. So very similar to a 401k match. When we started offering this, we faced some headwinds initially because it's a taxable benefit, right? Okay. At the time it was. And employers will come to us and say, well, look, I can give my employee $100 through the student loans, or I could just give them $100 in cash. Why don't I just give them cash and let them figure it out? And our thought process was the exact same reason why you would have just give them cash and say put it towards your retirement, or put it towards healthcare. If you have to give people systems and processes in place to help solve those pain points, and just assuming that the employee will figure it out on their own is not really being a good financial steward for that employee. And if you want your employees to be more productive, we know that financial stress is one of the biggest causes of lack of productivity in the workplace. And so it also is in your best interest if you want them to work better so that they're not stressed about these things outside of the workforce. So we started with this matching program, which actually since last March, the federal government made tax exempt through 2025. So now any employer that wants to make a contribution to their employee student loans can do so on a tax exempt basis, meaning that you don't have to pay the FICA tax and your employee doesn't have to pay state or federal taxes on it. So now it's actually more cost effective to give them money towards their student loan, which you don't have to pay taxes on, than to give them the money in cash, which you do have to pay taxes on. So that was the first solution we launched with. And then we would work with employees, and they would ask us questions. Well, we do a lot of work with nonprofits, hospitals, public schools, private schools, et cetera. And they would say, well, I think I'm eligible for programs like public service loan forgiveness or teacher loan forgiveness, or I'm thinking about refinancing. And we would say, well, just call your servicer. Just that's not something we do. Our job is just, we're helping you pay this off. And then we realized that there was just a lot of misinformation out there. People weren't aware of their programs that they were eligible for and additional savings through various federal loan programs. And so we launched a tool called Emekas, where we essentially help borrowers navigate these different programs. One such program, public service loan forgiveness, is a program that will forgive your loans tax-free after 10 years if you work for a nonprofit, a 501c3 organization. That's most hospitals, schools, think American Red Cross, municipalities, your local governments. These are all nonprofit institutions. So a lot of people, believe it or not, work for nonprofits.
Yes.
Both my parents worked at government jobs their whole lives. Those are nonprofit institutions. And if you work at these, you're eligible for loan forgiveness after 10 years. Unfortunately, there's a lot of hoops to jump through to get these to essentially qualify for these federal rebate programs that most people aren't aware of. And that's led to a 99% rejection rate for these programs. So part of another tool that we launched was to help essentially invert that. Let's get this to a 99% approval rate by working with you to essentially stay compliant, make sure that you're doing the annual certifications right, you're enrolled in the right program, so that we're maximizing your loan forgiveness and lowering your monthly payments. So as we've listened to the borrower and worked with different employer partners, we've learned more about our customer, and our value proposition and our products have evolved to really meet the needs of the customer. So what we're launching this year is really the next evolution, which is we're helping you get additional payments from your employer to lower your payments. We're helping you find federal rebate programs that either lower your payments or quality your forgiveness. Now, the next evolution is let's talk about investing.
Yeah.
So what are we doing?
Yeah.
We're taking the savings that we find for you, right, through lower monthly payments or through your employer's contribution. And then we're working with you to invest those savings in index funds using dollar cost averaging. So dollar cost averaging is one of the most tried and true methods for building an investment vehicle. You're not taking any risk. You're not picking individual stocks with index funds, and you're buying consistently. And then we're creating a vehicle whereby the gains from these investments are being used to help you pay down your debt. So you're creating this vehicle where over the course of time, you're going to be debt free and have an investment vehicle. The reason why we're doing that is that we know that, again, back to the savings crisis, 40% of Americans can't cover a $400 emergency expense. People aren't saving for retirement. But then there's also this group of folks who aren't investing. They're not building their assets, sort of medium-term assets that they can use for liquid events like buying a home, buying a car, or things like that nature. And we're really working to help people build up their assets, because at the end of the day, the only way to financial freedom is wealth creation.
Absolutely.
Right? Like that's really it. And so how do you help people start those building blocks of wealth now while they have student debt versus waiting 10, 15 years down the road to pick up after they pay their debt off? Because most people think that I have to either pay off debt and then invest. We're saying you can pay off debt and invest. You can do both at the same time.
Absolutely.
Let's just show you the best way to do both.
Absolutely. The first part I got totally right, paying down your debt and the partnership with the employer to help do so, right? Which seems to me like a win-win-win, because the employer gets to allocate some money that is clearly an employee benefit, create a stronger bond, and hopefully extend. Typically they see, and I was in HR at one point in my life. You see the extension of employee goodwill, and employer goodwill to employees. You see higher retention, right? And you save those costs, right? Ridiculous. And you also get, to your point, now to non-taxable benefit, et cetera. Two, you now introduce yourselves as another integral partner in a relationship, and now you're helping counsel the employee. And I see a two for there. One, the opportunity to pay down the debt, but two, also now having some with this DCA investing, not only saving for the longer term asset and wealth creation, but also a lot of times people don't have emergency savings at all. Right. It's not there usually. So you're having some of both being built up. And then explain to me that second piece in between those two that you talked about a little bit. I think there was a piece in there.
As far as, so there's a piece where we're helping people qualify for federal rebate programs such as public service loan forgiveness or teacher loan forgiveness. So these are additional programs where the government will forgive or cancel a portion of your federal loans. Now you have to apply. They don't just happen magically. There's certain things that you have to do. For example, for public service loan forgiveness, you have to work in a nonprofit. You have to certify your employment with that nonprofit every single year. You have to be in an income-driven repayment plan. You have to certify that income-driven repayment plan every single year, and you have to have the right loan type. And each of these have their own processes. Each of these may have different servicers that you're speaking with, and any wrong step can either extend, delay, or completely invalidate your opportunity for loan forgiveness. So we have an assessment tool where if you work for one of these institutions, you come into our tool, you answer a couple of questions, and we'll let you know right there on the spot if you're eligible for these additional programs. And if so, we'll let you know how many months you have accrued for it, what do you have remaining, the steps required to actually enroll in those programs, and you can work with us to essentially qualify for that. One of the things that we learned about these federal programs is that they also help retention. So we worked with one local nonprofit hospital here in Philadelphia, and we just launched this tool again. We call it EdAssist because they're a nonprofit, and we were typically finding savings of $150 or more a month in reduced payments, and we were seeing people being eligible for up to $55,000 of loan forgiveness on average. We did a study after a year comparing the voluntary turnover among PeopleJoy clients versus the general voluntary turnover of the hospital, and we found that the voluntary turnover rates among PeopleJoy clients was 41% lower. And the reason why it was 41% lower is now you now know that you're eligible for a federal loan program that has forgiveness of your loans. You know that you have to work at a nonprofit to get this forgiveness, and you now know how long you have to work at a nonprofit to get this forgiveness. So if I'm working at a nonprofit and I like where I'm at, and I'm being told I'm eligible for $100,000 of forgiveness, I just have to work here for 5 more years. Guess where I'm going to work for 5 more years? Right? And you don't have to work at that particular nonprofit. You can work at any nonprofit, and they will. If you leave a nonprofit and come back, that's okay. You don't forfeit the prior time that you've worked. But all things considered, if somebody has a great work environment and you have these other incentives in place, it's going to help with retention.
That's strong. That's strong. And a couple of messages I would convert this to for people listening, just so you can hear it in your own way. If you're a leader listening to this message, right, everything you heard was applicable. But I would add to this. I was reading an article the other day. I think it was Fortune, or I'll try to put this in the notes for the notes on the podcast. It said by 2025, more than 75% of all jobs will require an undergraduate degree. Full stop. More than 75%. Okay. It then further went on to say, by their analysis, the people who did this work, and I forget what university it came out of, but it was a respectable university, of course. The underrepresented populations will be further disadvantaged, right? So if you're a leader, an advocate, it's an ally, etc., get your mind wrapped around, we're going to have a compounded issue, right? And you're going to have more people with more student debt who need to figure this problem out. So here's another way you can think about getting in front of it now by inserting programs such as this if you don't have one. Part one. Part two, if you have people with the debt now, right, who have associate's degrees and things like that, they're going to need to up the ante. So you need to help them dig out from what they already have, right, before they take on more. And then you have the next generation come in. Part three, if you've been worried about the transient nature, I've heard some leaders talk about, of millennials and whatnot, this could help solve some of that gap as well. Used to be, and I think some of this is true, the first employer who gets an employee sometimes has the best bite at the apple if they make it a workplace that person wants to stay at. That person has the best shot. But it's got to be a place they want to stay at. It's got to be a community they want to stay at, right? That's your best shot. So make it that place they want to stay at. So, Emeka, you hit on some wonderful things here. If a person's listening right now and says, man, I wonder if this is the right program for me, how do you describe the ideal client? Is there such a thing as ideal beyond having student debt?
So no, great question. I think it's an ideal client is really someone who's interested and cares about their employees, which I think all employers do. So it really comes down to, determining if you have a budget for this, right?
Yeah.
And as you mentioned earlier, we can clearly show the retentive power of programs like this. And most employers have already done a cost benefit analysis of what the cost of losing an employee in terms of just lost time and training and everything like that. So really any employer, a lot of, again, folks think that, hey, this is what we've talked to some employers who will say, well, the average age of my population is 50. So nobody has student loans. And I always smile on that because I'll say, well, the average age on our platform is 40. Right? Parents co-sign on their kids' student loans. They borrow for them. Nobody wants to be the parent that told their kid you can't go to college, right? And so oftentimes we see grandparents and parents who've taken out debt. 90% of the private student loans taken out have co-signers.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, again, a cross-generational issue, and we'll send out surveys with employers, and typically we'll see anything in the range of 25 to 30% of employees have student debt. So I say if you're unsure, just you can contact us, take a small survey. You can send your own internal surveys to see what the appetite might be among your employees. I think what we're seeing is that employers are starting to realize that a benefits package, a one size fits all benefits packages just don't work anymore. One size fits all means one size fits none. There's just so many different generations and cultures and so many things within an organization. You have to be okay with a benefit that may not cover everybody, right? And that's okay. Like those are the fringe benefits that, to your point, make the place really, really great to work. And people know that, hey, my employer is thinking about things that I think about outside of work, and being able to offer those benefits. And obviously, again, the main thing is it has to be cost effective for you.
Absolutely.
And so the benefit of our program is some of the tools that we use, like our EdAssist tool, which is an advisory tool for employees, is free for the employer. You don't have to pay anything, right? Obviously, the employer matching contribution, you have to there's a cash component involved with that. But the first step, I think, is just, obviously, if they're listening to you on this podcast, and then they're already individuals and listeners who want to make a difference, who are looking for ways to really be leading edge contributors in their businesses and respectively themselves. And so I think just having that conversation and being comfortable just reaching out to folks in your network, or reach out directly to us and just having a conversation to just learn more is the first step.
Yeah, absolutely. So well said. And Emeka, I think, one of the points you mentioned too on the average age, I think, folks have to realize, please don't be age biased on this, because people, this is not about somebody going out of high school, who went back, who went in for their first undergrad. People going back to school, or going to school rather, are all ages nowadays, right? The segmentation will surprise you. I sit on the board of a university, and people go back all the time to retool, or who didn't go the first time because right out of high school they started working and then decide, I want to go back and get it and fulfill it and be the first person in my family, or whatever the case may have been. So
exactly,
you may be surprised the folks who are going to school right now who just didn't tell you that they were going back to school. Right. So don't miss the opportunity to be of benefit. Last question for you. People who are watching, who are saying, great, everything you said makes sense. It would be a dream if my employer adopted a program like this, but they don't, and they probably won't. What 2 or 3 things would you recommend to me that I can do for myself to reduce my student debt? How should I be thinking differently?
Yes. So I think first and foremost is to set a goal for yourself around how you want to manage your student debt, and what you want, what your goals are sort of financially. And so there's no wrong answer, meaning that for some people, it may be, I want to pay off my debt as aggressively as possible. And so set a target in mind. Hey, I want to be debt free in 5 years, set a budget and focus on that. For others, it might be, I'm okay with managing my debt. I want to focus more on investing. In that case, you might be looking at extending your payment to lower your debt payment, and then using those savings to invest in other vehicles. That's the approach that I took, right? Because I wanted to be debt free, but at the same time, I know that in order to really capture and build wealth, you have to start as soon as possible. Never too late, but the earlier the better. And so, I was creative in that trade-off of keeping a budget and staying below my means, but also tracking how much I'm putting towards that and how much I'm investing, and making sure that the trade-off worked. So I'll tell folks they can always, we work with individuals as well. So we like to work through employers, but we work through individuals. So both individuals and employers, if they want to get a student loan assessment, can visit us, peoplejoy.com, and come to our site and get an assessment. I also say, really, really start to understand, like just have a basic understanding of compounding interest, investments, and dollar cost averaging. These are terms that I know I threw out earlier, but dollar cost averaging simply means, rather than, if you want to buy $1,000 worth of stock, don't try to time the market. Don't say, hey, I'm trying to jump into GameStop right now and I'm going to put the whole $1,000 in. Instead, divide it over a period of 12 months. So what's that? Maybe $84 or something like that. And every month buy $84. Some months you're going to buy less shares of the stock because the stock price is going up. Some months you're going to buy more because the stock is going down, but you're only buying that $84. So you're not trying to time the market. And that's, to me, is the best approach, the safest approach to investing in the stock market is dollar cost averaging. So learn those strategies, and really try to build up, a good understanding of finance. I know some folks are more comfortable with a financial advisor. I think even if you work with a financial advisor, you should still know what they're talking to you about.
Mm-hmm.
You should still, you have to be smart, because, you want to be able to ask the right questions and be knowledgeable. This was something that I wanted to do. So I just went and worked on Wall Street because that's how much I wanted to learn about investing in finance. But you don't have to you don't have to work on Wall Street. You can talk to a friend, look for folks within your network. Everybody has somebody who's the person who's investing, or and things like that. Just find that person and spend some time with them to really educate yourself, because it's not enough to just work and just think that because I work and I'm good at my job, life will take care of itself for me. Like, that's not how it works. And I just saw that firsthand growing up, right? I saw my parents, working and not having the opportunity or the means to make these investments, and not saying that they're struggling now, but I saw what that looked like, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't have to go through that.
Yeah, no, that's so good. Two things you said in there I just want to highlight before we wrap is the dollar cost averaging piece. Deciding the amount and sticking to the amount and being consistent is so key, as opposed to looking for these quote unquote opportunities in the moment.
Yes.
Right? You're gonna make this big come up, Don't do that. Staying consistent is the way to go. And the trade-offs, right? Making the trade-offs, right? If you decide the goal and say, look, I got $10,000 I want to pay off. I want to pay off an extra $100 a month. And then if you itemize your budget and say, look, if the cable bill is $150 and you say, man, I'm going to cut the cord and we're going to do YouTube TV for $39.99, right? And you go, oh my God, I can't live without cable. You will find, if you want it bad enough, you'll live without cable. If you look at shit, whatever, you pick what it is, movies, how many times you eat out. Like, if you itemize your bill, like if you use mint.com or something, download all your transactions and whatnot and go line by line and categorize them, and you start picking a few categories and go, I'm going to slash here, here, and here to fund this $100 to pay this down, right? So over 50 months, I pay that $100 to pay down this $5,000. or whatever, you will, that's how you get there. You have to be systematic to hit that goal. You have to find where I had someone used to always say it's easier to save than it is to earn extra. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way to approach it. When he says trade-offs, that's how I think about the trade-offs.
And you're right. And the beautiful thing about today is that there's so many tools out there that will auto invest for you and sweep things where you can just sort of set and forget. Back in the day, you had to sort of, write these things down and go to your bank account and actually force yourself. You don't even have to do that anymore. You could just set and forget.
Exactly. I think Robinhood was a popular one until a few weeks.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Yeah. So Robinhood, Acorns, you name it. There's a ton of tools out there. So it's really gotten easier to save. And I think what I learned is just, I think, James, it's okay to look. If it's okay to put a little. If you want to go and buy the next GameStop again, I'm not pumping. I don't own any GameStop, but it's okay to have a little fun, right? Like I think some people just get discouraged and think, and I don't want to change my lifestyle and eat ramen noodles for the next 5 years. I'm not saying that. Like you should have a little fun. So if you're gonna maybe if you're gonna put $10,000, maybe you put 9,500 in index funds and dollar cost average, and then 500 is something that you're taking a little risk with. You're a stock that you're.
That's a great way.
Just a little bit. Enjoy yourself, right? What I'm saying is don't put $10,000 into some hot bet because your buddy told you that this is going to take off because he knows somebody inside the company, which is first of all, it's insider trading, so don't ever do that. But just be smart about it. And I think that we're at a point now with, you mentioned Robinhood, where investing used to be. I remember being at Merrill Lynch and investing was $30 a trade. Literally every trade I made, I had to pay $30 in commissions on.
Right.
Robinhood is now free. Right. And so this has now opened up investing to so many more people, which is great. But at the same time, a lot of people, I think, are they're riding the wave. The market's up like 40% in the last 8 months. A lot of people just think, hey, I'm a good stock picker. And it's like, no, you're riding the wave. Right? Exactly. And the wave will come down at some point, and you need to be prepared for that. And dollar cost averaging is what does that for you.
Yeah, exactly. Emeka, you dropped a lot of jewels. I know the audience will appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Coiling Solution audience, as you know, these are our thoughts, but we always love to hear yours. Leave your messages, comments, wherever you're listening to the podcast. As always, if it's of value, make sure you click subscribe, share it with someone you know, love, and want to add value to their lives as well. See you next time.